Competition Commission of South Africa has been at the forefront to expose corruption in the private sector in the form of the many cartels and monopolies in this country. Commissioner Tembinkosi Bonakele has painted a gloomy picture of the extent of the rot in the private sector, which runs into billions and billions of rand, and he says has engulfed virtually all sectors of our economy. Recent cases uncovered by the Commission include more than a dozen local and foreign banks rigging currency and price fixing, even at the Johannesburg Fresh Produce markets. Now, major rulings also include, of course, the 1.5 billion rand ArcelorMittal fine for price fixing, and rulings that chastised Telkom and SA Breweries for abusing their dominance. Now, the Commission has also made damning findings against consumer goods company Unilever. Within the last 12 months, 133 new cartel cases of collusion have been investigated across all sectors of our economy. South African cartels have also been exposed for imposing price premiums much higher than the world average, according to Bonakele. The world average is around 10%, but the starting point is around 15% locally, sometimes going as high as 100%. Sipho Ngwema is the head of communications at the Competition Commission of South Africa. He joins us at our studios in the capital, Pretoria. Sipho, a very good morning to you, and thank you for being with us today.
Good morning, Eben, and thank you for having me on the program.
I'm sure you've heard the scene setter that I've just spoken about how deep the rot is, but tell us, paint a picture for us in South Africa. How deep is the rot in the private sector when we talk about unethical practice?
Let me first say that the Competition Commission gives effect to the Competition Act, and the issues of corruption are dealt with by the National Prosecuting Authority and other law enforcement agencies in terms of criminality. However, there are misdemeanors that are in the Act in terms of price fixing, in terms of collusion, in terms of exclusionary conduct and foreclosure, basically. Because our concern is always around whether or not there are issues that distort competition, threaten it, or even prevent it. So indeed, we are uncovering a number of cases. A number of companies are coming forth to the Competition Commission to report incidences where there's a lot of unethical conduct, as you said, in terms of doing business, and there's a lot of bullying. And we are investigating many cases that involved price fixing and many others. We are doing public hearings. We were in Cape Town last week talking about issues around retail, where the anchor tenants have exclusionary or exclusive contracts, and long-term exclusive contracts that have got impact on the smaller players. So yes, we are involved in making sure that what is prescribed in the law, we apply it.
Is there danger, or has it happened already, that this becomes the culture of how we do business in South Africa?
I think it's a combination of issues, but I think it is true that there is a pervasive culture where business breaks the law in terms of competition. And this is why you'll find that there's a huge backlog at the Competition Tribunal, where we are taking businesses before the tribunal because they've breached the Act. And very many of these demeanors affect the consumers, because at the end of the day, if you don't have a conducive condition for competition, the people who will bear the brunt of that are consumers. So there's a lot of that, and we have to deal with it. And as a Competition Commission, we are equal to the task.
We talk about 133 cases across all sectors that you guys are looking at. How many of those cases have now moved on to the tribunal? And can you give us an idea of how long that process will then take?
Of course, any case depends on the merits of that case. For example, if we take the forest case, we had to initiate, meaning that we had to put our papers before the tribunal. The tribunal then will have to hear. There will be a lot of legal technicalities involved because the actual merits of the cases are heard. So averagely, I would say it takes minimum probably around 2 or more years for a case to be finalized. But as I said, it's case-by-case basis, and it depends on the merits and how long the case is and how many counts are there. But averagely, we tend to look around, as I said, 2 or 2.5 years when the case is before the tribunal. If there are no agreements, if there are no concessions and the parties do not agree to penalties.
The current batch that we are looking at, talk to us about how many of these cases or these instances are affecting the poorest of the poor. And I'm talking about things like price fixing on margarine, bread, school uniforms, and so forth. We hear about all of these. How many affect the poor directly, would you think?
I think the bulk of these cases even affect the ordinary people, particularly the poor. You must remember, we have a history in the country of concentration, in fact, of over-concentration of business. I mentioned to you earlier that we are doing public hearings on retail, and you'll find that about 4 retailers dominate up to about 90% of that particular sector, meaning that you only have got 4 competitors and you can only compare to a large extent 4 prices. When these companies collude, when they fix prices, because basically fixing of a price, it means there's not going to be competition, or if you allocate markets to yourself to say even you will trade in Pontyville, Sipho, you will trade in Netrecht, it means that those communities only have you and I to buy from, and therefore we can impose whatever prices that we are imposing. We saw in the bread cartel that they colluded amongst themselves for the prices of bread. We have taken a matter to the tribunal that involves potato. Because it also affects in the end the history or the price of potatoes. On the other hand, we are doing a case general in fruit and veg, because if it is true that the smaller farmers are being squeezed out and higher prices are being charged to the retailers, that cost is passed on to the consumer. So it's going to be difficult, more difficult in fact, for those people who are already languishing in poverty to be able to pay those prices because the companies collude amongst themselves and they agree on a price. Now when there is no competition, it means that I will struggle to get a price that I can afford or a price that is better than the one next door. So those are some of the challenges. In fact, very many of these cases, be it in food, be it in furniture or anywhere, at the end of the day, the people who bear the brunt of higher prices and a lack of competition are the ordinary people, and the majority of our people, as you know, are poor people. And they are the ones who have to spend their hard-earned pennies to pay these prices that sometimes are excessive because those who dominate the market impose higher margins for themselves, and therefore consumers, and particularly, as I said, the poor suffer.
I just want you to give us a quick update, if you can, with regards, of course, to the very high-profile collusion in the banks and currency manipulation case. Where are you? Is that moving forward? Is it going to the tribunal as well?
Thank you very much. We referred that case when we made the initial announcement to the tribunal to say we are charging these banks because they have colluded and fixed the price in terms of forex. What then followed was the toing and froing in terms of legal arguments, the banks responding to us. Where we find ourselves now is that the banks, very many of them, I think about 14, have engaged in legal technicalities, meaning that they are dealing with the legal issues around questioning whether we have the right, meaning in law we have the jurisdiction to charge them. Some of them say we have not given them evidence for them to defend themselves. The reality, though, is that we have presented our case. We have also said we have got jurisdiction to charge them. In fact, some of them have already have reached agreements with us and they have paid fines. Some of them, even those who say we don't have jurisdiction, have initiated discussions with us for purposes of a settlement. So that case is proceeding, but we are dealing with those legal technicalities as soon as they are out, and we are insisting that let us come and deal with the merits, because what is interesting to us is that we haven't had anyone who says they were not involved in the collusion and the price fixing. So we say, let's finish the matter and let's go to the tribunal if they have issues. Let's deal with the merits so that the matter can be wrapped up as soon as possible.
Sipho, of course, the thing that's concerning, in conclusion, the thing that's concerning to all South Africans is the effect that these kind of practices have on the poor. This kind of unethical behaviour, private sector corruption, they call it. Are we going to win this war against private sector corruption ever? Can we turn this tide? What's your sense?
As far as the Competition Act and our mandate as a Competition Commission in dealing with the misdemeanors, in dealing with the breaches of the Act, we are fairly confident. In fact, our output has now increased because more people are becoming aware of the Act, they're becoming aware of the Competition Commission, they're becoming aware of the work that we do. And we are seeing a lot of people coming forward. Of course, you know, it's in the nature of mankind to take chances, but I think we are turning the tide in terms of making sure that the culture in doing business is open, is free, is transparent, and is conducive to competition, so that at the end of the day, the consumers are not harmed through collusion, through price fixing, and higher prices. So yes, we are fairly confident that we are equal to the task, as I said, and we are turning the tide in terms of education, in terms of people being aware of what we can do, but also exposure, because there are more whistleblowers coming forward to us to say we suspect collusion or we were involved in acts of that breach the Competition Act.
Sipho, thank you very much for joining us and lifting the lid for us on what is a very concerning matter for all of us here in South Africa. Yes, private sector corruption. We hear about 133 cases being investigated by the Competition Commission with regards to collusion and corruption in the private sector. Just